Welcome to the Collector's Cast, everybody. We're back. We're here. I'm Clint. He's Mike. Hello. We're talking collecting everyone. Again. Guess what we're talking about today?
Well, I don't have to guess because I know. We're going to be talking about books.
We are going to talk about books and the people that collect them and why they collect them and all that good stuff.
And you know, the thing about books is you could collect books because of an interesting subject. You could collect books because they're old. You could collect books because they're sentimental to you.
We've heard on this very show that people collect them just to display, to have a bunch of leather-bound, cool looking like they're a lawyer or something.
Yeah, and also people collecting books on speculation that the book will become more valuable with time.
Yeah, which I know nothing about. But we have a guest coming on in a little bit here that might know a little more about that. I'm sure he does.
Yeah.
Personally, I always loved reading as a kid. And, of course, nothing's as easy as sitting down and watching a TV show or a movie, but you get into a book and you just get into the depths of it and you just really are transported almost. And you forget you're reading sometimes. You're there in the story so deep, so much. And that's what I've always enjoyed. Did you read as a kid?
Well, of course I did.
We're not... Well, not the books where you open the page and something pops up. I'm talking about the books without pictures in them and the like.
Yeah, well, I read some without pictures, but
yeah, I did a lot of my reading as a kid in magazines. I loved Cartoons magazine and Conan magazines.
Let me tell you a story about my reading, because I think that my children think that I'm not a reader, or I never was a reader. But I tell you this: so I played, several years of junior hockey in the Western Hockey League, and first in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. So I couldn't even begin to imagine the miles that I put on in a bus.
Oh, good time to read.
Yeah, exactly. So you think, you get on the bus in Saskatoon and you're going to Victoria, or you're going to Medicine Hat or Calgary, wherever we were playing.
Well, Victoria sounds further than Medicine Hat.
Yes, and that, all those teams were in the league. But at that time, surprise, surprise, we did not have phones. We were lucky if you had a Walkman.
Yeah.
Playing a cassette tape, right? And those things ate batteries like you wouldn't, like crazy, right?
For sure.
So you could listen to a little bit of music, but reading was the thing. And my good buddy Don Clark and I, we had huge collection of
brother
Western
of the
novels.
Famous Wendell Clark.
Yes, brother of the famous Wendell Clark. And Don and I would buy these books, The Gunsmith and The Gunslinger, and all these different series.
So did you read
Western
a lot
novels.
of the Louis L'Amour and the Zane Grey kind of stuff, the old Westerns?
Yeah, all those. And then, you throw in some history books of World War II, and
I know you're a war
magazines
history buff.
Yeah, so did a lot of reading on the bus. Had a lot of time to kill.
With me, it was always science fiction. I'd like to be transported to other galaxies and universes anyway. Well, we could go on all day about all the different genres of reading. I think what we should probably do is get a book expert on and talk to them and see what it is that makes people buy these things.
Yeah, that's a good idea, and it's going to be an interesting guest.
Yeah, we're going to have Dan Kyle from his own bookstore on Vancouver Island.
Comox Valley?
Yeah, Comox Valley. Nearly New Books, I believe it's called. Well, he'll tell us all about it when we come back. We'll be back right after this with our special guest.
See you in a few minutes.
Welcome back to the Collector's Cast, everybody. As you know, we're talking about books and collecting books in general today. And who better to have on, Mike, than somebody who's in the book business? We've got a special guest all the way from Comox, British Columbia, over on Vancouver Island. He owns a bookstore called Nearly New Books, and his name is
Dan
Kyle. Dan Kyle from Comox. Welcome, Dan. How are you doing today?
Welcome. Yeah, thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks.
I love your show.
Thanks for being
your
here,
podcast.
Dan.
Excellent. Yeah, it's the newfangled thing all the kids are listening to, apparently.
Yep, apparently.
So
I'm not a kid. I'm not a kid. I'm well into my second half century.
There you go. So are we as well. So we're all talking from the same level here. So we've been talking about books here, Dan, and collecting books. Do you yourself? I know you have a bookstore. Are you somewhat of an expert on older books, or do you know old books? And
I can certainly talk about it. I've been first of all a book reader ever since I could start to read at about 4 years old. Ended up skipping grade 1 because I could read ahead of everyone else. My mom was a teacher. And my wife, who runs the store with me, and also my daughter, who's now gone through university and married, worked at our bookstore. It's been around 25 years in Comox.
Oh, cool.
So it's well established. Anyway, about the books themselves, books, as most people probably know, have been around for over 500 years since Gutenberg got the printing press going. So that really changed things.
Let me correct you. They did exist before that, but they were expensive as heck because they had to be hand lettered every single one.
In fact, they go printed materials, ephemera, go all the way back to 220 BC.
Wow.
With the Chinese and woodblock printing. That was the very first printing. And from there, it was all hand transcribed. So you're right. Books were very expensive and only for the rich. It was the printing press that changed everything, and books became for the masses. And over the last 500 years, pretty much I think everyone is a reader because it's pretty hard to get through school without it. Mm-hmm. Books as a medium for information and entertainment, as also people are well aware, predate everything else people are using much more these days, like television and films and records and LPs and streaming. All of that's just the last 100 years.
Well, everybody knows. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was going to say everybody knows reading is time consuming, and that's why people are more prone to watch the movie and see how it went. But there's nothing beats the actual reading of a good book. Everybody, I think, can agree on that. You don't get as submerged.
And you bring up a good side topic, which, of course, is ebooks.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you can't collect ebooks. In fact, you don't even own the ebooks that you would download on your Kindle. They're owned still and can be deleted at any time. You're really just renting them. Now, ebooks really came into the mainstream, mostly through Amazon, but several other people just about 15 years ago. They started just around the time of the last recession. And everyone thought bookstores and books would just go the way of the dodo. They have not. Because reading a book is a lot different experience than reading a screen. And it's tactile, and you learn better, and you retain the book, what you've read better.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
And I think as a child is when you start your love of books. So people often keep the children's books, and they keep them for their children. So collecting books is something that is quite common, I think, for a wide spectrum of people and ages.
And isn't it not true that this is how I've felt about books, especially in the, like say in this day of ebooks, is I can take that book that I have and I can physically hand it to my son or one of my daughters. And I can say, hey, read this. Or I can say, hey, listen, this was a favorite book of mine. I'd like you to have it. And you hand that book down to somebody. And there's a lot in that to me anyways.
I agree. Now, books also have, because you're focusing on the collecting of books, most people don't think of themselves necessarily as book collectors. So there's two main reasons you would collect a book. The passion, which you speak of, it touches you emotionally. And books, I think, are probably as special to people as almost any object that they would have in their room or their house. Mm-hmm. Because it's hard to feel that way about a CD, video or something. A book is very personal. People often write their names in it and says this belongs to. Mm-hmm. The other factor, the collector side though, is the money. And books, of course, like anything else that's collected, can be worth quite a bit.
Yes.
And that brings in a whole spectrum. And now this is, I mentioned ebooks. Well, of course, we have the internet as well, the last couple of decades, where we see online booksellers and everything that goes with that, speculation and whatnot.
Well, you hit it on the head when you said about it being a tactile, personal thing. I've tried a couple of those Kindle ebooks before, and I don't think I ever got through one all the way, to be honest. It just wasn't the same experience. I equate it to the same as getting your news off your phone compared to reading a newspaper. That smell of opening a fresh paper, same as a book. There's a personal experience that you just are never going to get with an electronic product.
And it's generally fairly inexpensive to collect. I mean, the new books, when they come out in hardcover, a lot of people, the collector mentality, people who really want to, I'll use Stephen King as an example.
Yeah.
I mean, he's both famous and derided, but his new books will come out. People will collect the first edition, which is probably the single most important word in book collecting.
Yeah.
First edition, first printing. And if you get one of those, chances are it's never going to go below the price you paid for it new. And that's the one thing about books. Even though they are not as durable as some other things, they very seldom drop in value as time passes. Because, if you had a Charles Dickens book that was printed 100 years ago, it's going to be worth a lot more than the 2 pence it probably cost you to buy down in London at the time.
Yes.
And and so books are, if you're careful, easy to store and retain their value, which is also important for collectors.
Sorry, well, we do talk about a lot of things collectible, and one of the things we get into sometimes is the care of certain items. And there's a lot of collectibles that are very fragile to things like moisture and sunlight, and books certainly would fall under that. You got to be.
You named the exact two things: moisture and sunlight. Mm-hmm. So if you keep them in a fairly stable room for humidity, not above 40, 50%, which is hard to do, especially, if you're closer to the ocean or whatnot. Mm-hmm. Because I run a used bookstore, of course, people are bringing me books for me to resell. And they've had books in their basement or their barn or even their attic, which tends to be dry, fortunately, but they deteriorate. And that's another problem with books as a collectible is where, say, if someone collected porcelain dolls, they can break, but otherwise you're pretty safe.
Yeah.
Books were never meant to be durable. You think of the pulp novels of the 30s and 40s or whatnot. Everyone's familiar with their old books going yellow.
Yes.
And that's because the paper it was printed on was a cheap paper. The other thing with books, and if you've ever been to pretty much any sort of collectible trade show where it's something fine, it can be a painting or whatever, book stamps are no different. It's on paper, which absorbs the oils in your fingers. So you often see people with the white gloves handling them delicately. So taking care of books is important. And we get people who will bring us a book that was published just 2 months earlier, and it looks like they put it through the washing machine. Other people will bring me in a book they've had for 50 years. It was their grandfather's, and it's been on the shelf in the dust jacket. It looks brand new. The spine's not even cracked. They've read it, but it's still in new condition.
I see people that read like that. They sit there on a flat table and they carefully turn each page. Man, you could always tell when I read a book because I dog-ear the pages to mark my place. It used to piss off my ex-wife to no end that I wouldn't use a bookmark. But yeah, that's just.
I will say, one thing about collecting versus the average consumer just using a product for what it's meant for is books fall into that same connotation of snobbishness where a lot of people will collect books and not even read them.
Yes.
You think of wine connoisseurs. That's probably the ultimate in hoity-toity. We've
talked about this. People that buy bottles of wine that they don't even intend to drink. They just have it. Yes.
Just have it. So I do want to say, as a person who sells books to the general public, and the bulk, of course, are mass market, just paperbacks. But, of course, I have the older collectible, hardcover, rare books, signed books by the author. That's where you start to get into something that it's the signature that becomes worth more than the book itself, really. But I do want to make it clear to anyone who's out there who's listening, this is for the everyday reader. A book is meant to be read. It's not meant to be treated as a painting that you can't get within 5 feet of.
Well,
Read the books.
I guess some stores would specialize in only high-end stuff. Is that like a specialty type place you'd see?
They do, and I think because you're in the Lower Mainland over there, and I'm here in a much smaller area, 65,000 people on Vancouver Island. We don't generally try to specialize, but of course we see everything.
Before our listenership barrages us with emails, 65,000 people in Comox, I'm imagining.
Well, Comox Valley.
Yeah.
That's Comox, Courtney, and almost to Campbell River. And
but you said the island, so I just wanted to clarify that there's a lot more people on Vancouver Island than.
Well, Vancouver Island has probably 800,000, but 500 are in Victoria.
Yeah, the lower half.
South of the Malahat. Now I've lost my train of thought.
No, sorry, I did that on purpose, but pardon me.
Yeah.
No, well, you were talking about the high-end bookstores versus just your regular.
Yes, you make a good point. As people will probably notice around either their small town like this or a bigger center like Prince George or Vancouver, bookstores have disappeared like some other businesses, but it has the last recession, and then the ebooks was when it started, and the online with Amazon. Mm-hmm. And you need to be in a place for us as a bookstore to survive, where first of all, we have one of the most elderly demographics, and let's face it, people over 60 are our core customer.
Yeah, they
here. Now in Vancouver,
let's ask Mike, my co-host. He just had a recent birthday that puts him in that. Are you a reader, Mike?
Yeah, and I'm more opt to go for the book. Yes.
Well, now I have to sidetrack in that only 40% of Canadians read one book a year.
Really?
So the idea, I've been at friends of mine houses, this is a few years ago, mind you, because TV Guide no longer gets published. It's digital on the screen or online. The only printed material in their entire house was the TV Guide.
Jeez.
Not even library books. And I do want to encourage people, this is not the collecting side. If you're a reader and can't afford necessarily even use books, go to your local library. Your taxes pay for it, and they have wonderful stuff. They do, and digital, like you can borrow it digitally on your
Well, I was
laptop.
going to say that also a library is one of the few places left in the world you can just go and hang out without the expectation of you having to spend money while you're there.
Well, you can go there and shower and everything in the washroom too, apparently, but that's a different topic.
I haven't gotten to that point.
Your kids can run around and you can eat and drink a Slurpee.
Oh,
so it's a lot different than the libraries we remember at school.
I didn't remember any Slurpees allowed in the library. But, I wanted to back up for a second. You touched on the two reasons people collect. I'm going to give you another one, and you sort of got close to it when you said that people have books they don't even read. We had a lady on here, Darby from Circa Vintage Antiques, an antique dealer here in town, that sells a lot of old leather-bound books to people just for display. They just want an old, cool-looking bookshelf in their nook or whatever.
Well, books do serve a purpose. You've probably been in hotel lobbies recently where they've started to do that to make it more homey, and they just have books up there, and sometimes there's not even the pages inside the leather-bound covers.
Sometimes
and they say
it's just
don't
a
touch.
fake block
they're fake
of them.
books. But realtors are using books to show a home. They got to dress it up and make it so they bring in furniture and books and whatnot too. You mentioned antique dealers, and that's a really good point for rare and collectible books because they're often clearing. A relative is clearing out their father's, grandfather's house. And an antique dealer will come in and buy everything, like all the furniture, and they'll obviously have to discard some stuff. But amongst that is most likely going to be some very old and often very collectible books. And so that's going to go in the lot sale at the auction and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So people who know that they have something valuable or they're just part and parceling it are probably not going to pick and choose one or two and try to sell it on Craigslist or through us or anyone else, right?
Well, I think it's when you get into the rare and expensive books, it becomes quite a narrow market. There's only a handful of people that are going to go and pay thousands of dollars.
Well, we all know of the big auction houses in London and New York that will auction everything of value, and certainly books can be in that category. You asked the question here in Comox. I got to tell you, I've sold a few books that might be $300 or $400, but $100 is even uncommon, because I'm trying to sell. I'm actually trying to get people to own books and not try to make it prohibitive. Mm-hmm. And my prices are not going to be as high as Vancouver.
You've kind of answered my other question I was going to ask. We're unfortunately we are on a time crunch and we can't go on all day about it. But I really wanted to touch on that. Is if you get into any of the rare stuff, and maybe what would be the most expensive book you've handled in your place?
In my place, I've got to say, and I won't give you my home address, but in my double car garage, I have 10,000 books that I can't sell because they're too valuable, and that's my retirement. Then I'm going to do and they're worth anywhere from 100 to 1,000 each. So there's quite a good nut of money out there waiting, and they're not going to be going down in value. Wow. But you touch on probably the most important thing. If someone is trying to collect a valuable book, are they going to fly around the country or over to Europe and go to auctions or go to used bookstores or what have you, antiquarian bookstores? No. Online has taken a good chunk of that market for obvious reasons, and even book dealers themselves, like me, if I were to buy and resell, it used to be all the old school, printed out a flyer once a month. You had to go to a directory, look up prices. Everything's online now. Mm-hmm. That actually has become a disadvantage for the collector, or even the casual collector who just wants to buy an old Rupert the Bear book from their childhood.
Dan, you're preaching to the choir here, because that's the same old story in antiques in general. The online market has really shrunk the world, and it's harder to have that one and only gem when there's 1,000 more for sale out there. But
and I say the name again, it's Amazon. That has changed everything for everyone, because there used to be a company that started up back in the 90s called ABE Books, right in Victoria, BC, and they started that for the online market. People trying to just find a book somewhere they could buy and hold dear that they had, in their childhood, or even people like, who wanted to get a whole lot. Anyway, Amazon bought them out a few years ago. So now when you go on both sites, you have really one seller. And the Amazon prices are actually about 20 to 30% higher than the A-book site, because Amazon gets far more traffic.
That's unfortunately
that's what's happened.
Too. That's a common thing too, where one big corporate entity buys out the other one. Yeah. So you might be a Hot Wheels collector over a Matchbox collector, but guess what? Mattel owns both. So the money's going into one pocket regardless.
So since you're aimed at the collector, hopefully the people listening here are people who are interested in collecting books and are maybe wondering for a tip. I'll give the best tip I can give.
That would be.
And I'm not tooting my own horn, because I'm up in Comox and I have a local region market, and I'm not not in the big field. Let's say, go around to thrift stores, to the Salvation Army, to the little local mom and pop thrift store, even the Value Villages, those supposed charity stores, but whatever. They're often selling books for under $5. Sometimes if it's like for a charity thrift store, it might be only $1 or $2.
Oh, they've got all sorts of cheap books. Yeah.
You can find some fantastic buys, because they're not speculating. Every book to them is just a commodity.
And what are they, just real quickly, because we are running low on time, what would they be looking for in those books? So, like, are you looking for the edition, the date it was printed?
Well, I'm not specifically talking about someone who's wanting to speculate themselves to be a collector. I'm talking the person who's been pushed away because of the high prices, that they know if they want to get that old, I don't want to use Hardy Boys, because those are a dime a dozen. But those books from your childhood that you remember and then your mom gave away when you went to college or something. If you want to find those again, hit the thrift stores.
Yeah, sure. Maybe not a giant monetary value, but more of a personal value, the stuff that you remember as a kid.
If you're now talking about the collector who's in it for the hobby business, like, I'm going to buy this and keep it like a bottle of wine, and it's going to be worth hundreds of dollars, and I can always sell it again. they already know this because they wouldn't be doing that casually. It's too easy to be wrong. They already know that you look on the flyleaf where it's printed. At the bottom, it says the date it was printed. It's always going to say first edition. And then you'll see a row of numbers, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If the 1 is missing, it's not a first edition.
Oh, so they remove numbers per edition?
Well, there's first edition actually doesn't mean the printing. First edition means that's the first typeset. So that size, which is hardcover, is anytime they have to reprint a run.
Yeah, they find mistakes later, and then they correct them and do a second print.
Or they didn't think it was going to sell as well. Like the first Harry Potter book came out, and they only printed a few thousand, like 5,000 or 10,000. Well, those will sell for $50,000
because
if you can get the very first printing, first edition.
And they've also got all the mistakes in them too. My daughter read the whole series, and she loves finding the mistakes in books.
As stamp collectors know, a stamp that has a mistake and the post office stopped printing, but a few were distributed, is the most valuable stamps of all.
Exactly.
So that's true of books too. And the second thing is if you can find an author's signature, and unlike, say, movie, photos of where you get buy online your favorite actor and it's signed, that can be fake.
Sure.
There's almost no chance that if you find a signature in a book from an author, it's fake, because who's doing that? No one. What you will see in some, I'll give you the Brandon Sanderson and I forget the series, Robert Jordan series. He died, Brandon. Those are pre-printed signatures, so I'm not talking about something that's a printed signature, and you can tell what that is. It's the pen and ink. Some authors use pencil for whatever reason. But,
the live signature,
people who are into this, just go on Google, say, how do I get into book collecting? And you'll get some great tips.
Sure.
Like everything else on the internet these days,
or they could phone Nearly New Books or go see Nearly New Books in Comox and talk to Dan Kyle.
Or come in and talk to me. I love books. I love people who love books. My MO, our reason for getting in the business, was to get books into people's hands. So I'm in it to make a living, but I wasn't in it to speculate and try to hold on to, and price out of the market. I do have some of those, but that's only because those are books that I've come across that in Comox, I'll never sell them at any price. They're like specialized, both fiction and nonfiction, and I'm going to have to go online, but I work 7 days a week at my store, and I just do not have the time. We're so busy with the local market.
Last question, Dad. Do you have, a lot of bookstores do you have a bookstore cat?
No. I've
noticed a lot of bookstores have a bookstore cat. Yeah. That's a kind of a thing.
I will give you my diplomatic answer on that. Is I'm allergic to animal hair. Nor do many people like. They might like the bookstore cat, and there's a book about a bookstore cat. But most people really, when they're buying used books, and this is important too. You mentioned the bookstore or the book smell. Now our bookstore smells like wood shelving and clean air. I guess I'm a little sensitive about the smell of old books, and maybe people like that. Like if it smells like nice, like a candle, and there are candles that have bookstore smell, and Shakespeare's den and whatnot. Is people are really particular, as they should be. The books are not musty or mildewy, and that they're not full of animal hair, or that people weren't eating Cheetos or reading them.
I didn't mean to any slight or anything like that.
No, you're going to find most of the existing used bookstores do have a cat. Yeah. And we get customers come in from those places and go, "You don't have a cat, I hope, because I don't want cat hair all over my books."
And never thought of that.
And so, I'm an animal lover. We have pets of our own, but it's not something that we mix with business.
There you go. Well,
I realize it's a cliche. It's a cliche.
Well, it's hey, I had to ask. It's funny how fast you can wring 15 or 20 minutes out of a subject without even scratching the surface. But
it was a pleasure talking to you both, Clint and Mike, anytime. And if we want to talk again on related subjects of ephemera, I'm a collector of all sorts of things.
Definitely sounds like we can go deeper, and we really appreciate having you this time. And if we can get you on again, we most certainly will, Dan. Appreciate it.
So happy to share something with the listening public.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. Mike and I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Dad.
cheers Cheers, guys. Bye.
And have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care, Dan.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And we're back. And that was Dan. He's a guy that knows a lot about rare books. I would have liked to have gotten into more of it. He's a good talker, and he's got a lot of knowledge on the subject, but about the rarity aspect.
Yeah, and the rarity aspect. We seem to always glean a lot off of Pawn Stars.
Pawn Stars, American Pickers, all those shows that show
right?
different collecting. I love
stuff,
them all.
and
it's like going to school.
Rick Harrison of Pawn Stars. He's a massive rare book collector.
Oh, he's a book nerd, big time. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen him spend crazy amounts of money on books.
True.
And he always brings on that.
Rick, if you're listening, we'll have you on as a guest anytime you like.
Yeah, the young woman Rebecca, the book expert, comes on.
I love it when she comes on.
She puts her gloves on, and she always says, first thing she always says, well, the most important thing about any rare book is its condition, of course. It's the number one thing. And I just, although I love all kinds of collecting, of course, but I really enjoy that when they bring on about the old books, and it just, I guess because it touches into history.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a history lesson every time she comes on.
Every time she comes on.
She doesn't just talk about the physical book, but everything behind it.
Even
it's
one
fascinating.
time, a guy came in with like the first ever book of the rules of baseball.
I remember that.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It was just so darn interesting, right?
Remember what our guest said, though? Dan said that why would anybody fake an author signature in a book? But they had that, too. The Shoeless Joe Jackson book they had come in. And it was, Shoeless Joe Jackson was known for being illiterate, and his wife would sign his name. And it looked like her signature, definitely. But then there was a messy one above that they were claiming was actually Shoeless Joe's. And Rick Harrison bought it for good money. And then he sent it off to some authenticating place, and they said it looked like the pen had been lifted off, and a part of it was even erased and redone, and they were all laughing at him anyway.
Wow.
It shows us, no matter, anybody can make a mistake. Anyway, not dwelling on that any further, we're going to close out our show as we typically do with a little bit of trivia and a listener question. And I believe Mike's got both teed up. What's our trivia today?
Well, our trivia today.
What possibly could you ask about books?
What is
hey, while you're looking it up, oh, you got it right there?
Yeah, I got it.
I was going to say, my quick trivia is, what is the name of the book that I wrote?
Flat World.
Our producer, Aiden, rings in. And he's not cheating at all because it's sitting right on that top of that little pile of books there. Yes, I did write a book once. It's a science fiction fantasy, Flat World. Book one, because there is a series coming afterwards. As soon as this one makes me my second million. I was still waiting on the first. It didn't
Very
pan
good
out.
book. I've read it. My kids have all read it. Great book.
Thank you for that.
Awesome.
Everybody that reads it tells me they like it, unless they're just sucking up or trying to be my friend.
But let's just
yes,
see
your trivia. Let's see
if it's going to get to these monetary standards.
Okay.
What was the most expensive book ever sold at auction, and who bought it? It was in 1994. I'll give you one hint.
Okay, I'm gonna just throw. Oh wait, our producer Aiden may have a guess.
Is it a Gutenberg Bible?
Thanks for stealing my. No, that's what honestly. That's what I was gonna say. It might be a Gutenberg Bible because they're worth a lot of money. There's not very many around.
No.
But other than that, is it a? It's probably a. Would it be? You know what? I'm not even going to guess. I'll just make myself look silly.
Now, I'm not the literary genius that my friend Clint is. The Codex Leicester, Leicester,
Leicester. The Codex Leicester? What is that?
The most expensive book ever sold, which was bought by Bill Gates in 1994 for $30.8 million.
Okay, what makes this book
You may
worth
not be
that?
from England. I think it's the Codex of Leicester.
Oh, Leicester?
Lei. Yeah, it looks like something like that.
Now,
just says
what is a
Codex
codex?
or Leicester.
A codex, by definition,
Well,
is...
I'm going to tell you what it is.
Yeah,
my friend.
I know the word, but go ahead.
It was essentially Leonardo da Vinci's science diary.
Okay, this is where he recorded all his stuff. Is this the thing that had the drawings in it of the I wonder if it had his original drawings in it, because Leonardo da Vinci designed a helicopter, I think, and an airplane or something way back in the, before anybody could even imagine.
Leonardo da Vinci's Science Diary.
He came up earlier on a show about a painting of his that sold.
Yeah, painting from
everything
museum.
that guy touches. If you find anything by Leonardo da Vinci, whether
keep
it's a
it.
painting or a piece of gum wrapper he wrote his laundry list on, you should probably keep it. Anyway,
Aiden has something to say.
Yeah, you and me, Clint, we're a bunch of goofs. It looks like the Gutenberg Bible sort of sitting around number 10 here for rare books.
Number
selling
10?
From anywhere between $4 and $5 million for a complete copy from the 1400s.
Okay.
Coming in
We could afford
ahead
that.
of it, Shakespeare's first folio, Edgar Allan Poe's Tamerlane and Other
I was going to
Poems.
bring up a Shakespeare thing. I wasn't sure if there was going to be something in there. Edgar Allan Poe, really?
Yeah, and it was also saying Ptolemy's Geographa.
Okay.
John Calvin's Institutes of Christian Religion. That's the bloody book.
Oh,
I
okay.
would say.
What about that? There was that book too. Mind you, it's only a one of one. That one that they found that's got all the strange language in it and strange, weird pictures, and that nobody can ever translate it or decipher it. Does that sound familiar? We'll get somebody writing us a letter saying that's the blah blah blah. Anyway, there's a whole lot of books there I haven't really heard of, and I'm sure they're worth millions. But I just like curling up with a good old Stephen King once in a while.
All right, so now
Yes.
we're going to move on.
To our listener question, our last thing of the show, but not our least thing of the
Whoa.
show.
From John, our listener question is John from Sechelt.
Oh, Sechelt, British Columbia.
British Columbia.
Lovely little
Canada.
town on the coast.
One of my favorite places to visit.
Very cool.
Absolutely. Great. The nice little ferry ride.
Yes.
Over there, a couple.
It's on the mainland, but you can't access it by road because
Yeah,
it's up the coast past inlets and
Yeah,
whatnot.
the Sunshine Coast.
What does John want to know today?
John would like to know. It says, sometimes I'm waiting on collectibles for a while, and I feel like my collection is dwindling. What's your desert island collectible? Pick only one.
Pick only one. Well, assuming you have food and sustenance and everything else there, and you just got to have something collectible.
Collectible that you're going to take with you.
I'm going to go with my old Winnebago toy there. Nothing makes me as happy as that toy. Even though I have 6 or 7 of them, they are what ring my bell, what get me excited. And I could drive it around in the sand and pretend it was out 4x4 and camping on the island. I don't know. What's yours, Mike?
Well, mine probably changes from time to time.
Okay.
But right now, probably my Boba Fett helmet.
Your Boba Fett helmet. Well, at least you keep the sun off your face.
that you got me.
I thought you were going to say one of your antique guns so you could maybe
Well,
I don't know,
need
shoot
to
a
defend
coconut out of a
myself,
tree
but-
or something like that.
I thought he was going to say the boat he could just leave.
The boat! The boat! What
Could
are we
just leave.
saying? You got boats in your collection.
But
of
I'm
course.
stranded. The boat probably had already sunk or I'd been shipwrecked there, right? On
I
the
just
deserted
saw.
island.
I just saw an interesting factoid that the model of boat that they used for Gilligan's Island, they named what year and what kind of boat it was, and they said it had a top speed of like 12 knots. So a 3-hour tour means it could only go like 41.2 miles. So wherever they were stranded wasn't very far.
Wasn't very far.
But I interjected. That was a Facebook post, and I interjected and I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Wind and currents could carry it a lot farther. I refuse to believe that my childhood was a lie." Good old Gilligan. What's he going to do next? Anyway, this has been our talk about books. It's been the Collector's Cast. It's always a fun journey. We always love having you. I'm Clint the Collector, Clint Wilson. This is Mike Bloski. I don't know what else we can say other than join us again, please.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Play safe.